Here we go. We're trying to bring up some slides here. And then make it bigger. And here we go. From what I've read so far of your homework, you all seem to be engaged and involved and glad to meet each other, or at least online. And so that was encouraging. I was also encouraged that everybody was posting by the deadline, as far as I could tell. So that's good news. And the other good news is we're back on the air. By the end of this week, we will be 28% of the course finished. 1/7 equals 14%, 2/7 equals 28. So we're moving very fast, and things are just going to continue to increase in speed as we go along. This week, I want to talk about credibility and how it fits into persuasion and how critical it is to being persuasive, especially for us in the communications business. So we're going to talk about how that works and talk about some examples. Then we're going to move gently into theories, and I'll take one theory in particular, which I think is easy to grasp and easy to use as a tool when you're examining communications messages for effectiveness and purpose. And along the way, we'll be talking about some examples of persuasiveness. Okay, here we are jumping off the deep end. Persuasion and reasoning. Reasoning can be a critical factor in your persuasive endeavors, because if you don't have valid reasoning behind a pitch that is predicated on or based on a good rationale, then it's going to fall flat. If you're just saying things to say things and because you think people will believe it no matter what the source, not going to work. So persuasion, in my mind, is very much based on good reasoning and good data. Now, the book talks about 3 approaches to bringing reasoning into a persuasive activity. One is the logic of it, portraying the activity or the knowledge that you are presenting as being logical in terms of the next steps, a logical progression in learning, a logical outcome of the actions that you are suggesting and promulgating. So there is an inherent necessity for logic in a presentation. The facts are critical to it, and they help to buttress your argument. So the more facts we have, and facts in this case are not opinions, although they may be the opinions of leading experts, but they are generally measurable. Whether you have to count something or whether you have to do some statistical reasoning and provide that data, facts are incredibly valuable in making a persuasive case. Of course, the facts have to lead or push the reader or the listener into the direction that you are suggesting that they go. Outcomes, in other words, previous successes in following the same path, are valuable as well, because there's a logic to the approach that says if someone else has done this and the outcome was what you wanted it to be, then that's a good, it's like a recommendation. This is why I believe that we are so addicted to Yelp and TripAdvisor and other review sites, because we want to know somebody else has tried this and they had an opinion about it. Now, the peculiar thing in my mind is that we put so much stock into the opinions of people whom we don't know, whom we may be not even real, because there have been cases of organizations, stores, and mail order or online outfits in particular who have fudged or even broadly lied in their reviews. They hire people to do reviews for them, and as you can imagine, most of those reviews are positive. So outcomes in the cyber world, like many other things, is sometimes difficult to discern the reality from the promotion. The current environment makes it difficult for us as communicators to be persuasive on any of these bases because there's so much stuff out there and there are so many people posting that, and they're posting about opinions, but they can sometimes have opinions that masquerade as data and as reality. And likewise, they can have recommendations from people who are not real or professional writers. So the speed of social media also makes it difficult to understand the credibility of something because it's hard to find details about something in the amount of time you need or you have when you are making a decision about whether a social media posting is credible and has anything behind it. The good news is that there's lots and lots of data from responsible sources, and I count Wikipedia largely as being responsible, and there seems to be a lot of people who work at making it very credible. But so there are sources to quickly enable you to check on the veracity of a claim or other kinds of promotional information that people are trying to persuade you about. By the same token, we as communications professionals need to make sure that everything we publish is backed up by data or by the best experts we know in the field. So the other half of the question is we and many others, but we make it a habit in communications to question the authority and the source of information that is being put out. We want to know where exactly it came from. Who did the study? How old is the data? How big was the sample? Who is this expert whom we've never heard of? And then maybe somebody who's just very highly skilled in their field, and we just don't play in that sandbox very often. So we don't know the expert, but they also may be somebody who has some outrageous ideas, even though they have an exalted degree, but they are promulgating unreliable, unsubstantiated documents and or opinions that with a little bit of checking can be seen as falling apart pretty quickly. Celebrity or credibility. And I think that one of the Kardashians and why she has credibility is a real question mark. But the book talks about ethos. There are three fundamentals of credibility, where credibility derives. And it's interesting that they go back all the way to Aristotle, and he talked about these three as the sources of what you should believe or what you can take stock in. Ethos is the good character and behavior bullet about credibility. If you've known someone for a while, or you have known of them for a while, and they have been upstanding citizens, they have not done anything that would allow you to question their credibility, they behave well towards their human beings and are responsible for good causes, and generally a good person. Michelle Obama seems to be in that category to some degree, to a large degree. I'm not going to get my politics messed up in there, but there are others who are not so responsible. We can talk about Bernie Madoff. the financial guru who was stealing money from his original clients or stealing money from his new clients to give to his original clients, and a classic Ponzi scheme. And so he was highly regarded, had people wanting to give him money, but his entire ethos, his entire character and behavior, which led people to want to give him money, was a sham. He was a bad person who stole $60 billion from people. Another way of building credibility is through the rational. This is a good thing because X, Y, and Z, and those are provable or they're indisputable characteristics, or because of the legality of the situation and the fact that it has been through the courts or it is according to a law. So there is, and in the bigger sense, there is an establishment or an organizational situation that is providing you with credible product, credible people, a credible organization to do business with, or a credible organization to support and to be a worker for. You can be hire on to be the agency for an organization with good character without any disregard, without any regard for concerns about their character and their credibility. Likewise, some people just have source credibility based on their position in life. Now, this is an interesting one, where somebody can be elected the president of a college or to the US Senate or any number of places and gain immediate credibility, even though they may or may not deserve it, or they may have to grow into it. So their ability to be credible depends on their situation. And I've run into a number of situations in my life where the person who was filling the job didn't really fill the job. He or she had been moved into the job by politics or by happened to be in the right place at the right time, and they just were not suited for a position that they had taken. So they had serious credibility deficits in my mind, and I often saw the case that their inability to rise to the occasion, their inability to do the work, caught up with them after a while. We'll talk about online sources and influencers in a second. But I want to talk a little bit about the state of credibility. And in my mind, the credibility of that people normally accepted in institutions, in the media, in government, in bosses, was seriously damaged by the Vietnam War. When we found out that the government was lying about the number of people who were being killed, about the number of enemy was being killed, about the successes in that conflict. And the New York Times guys did some wonderful in-depth reporting about the disconnect. Now, we know that the government lies to us periodically when they think it's in our best interest, or it's a situation where dealing with providing the information could mean harm to people or reveal sources and methods, as they say, so that our enemies could have a better understanding of our strategy. But I still think that Vietnam is kind of a watershed point, because we found that the government was lying purposely and continuously without fear, and because they thought it was the right thing to do. And this chart that I just brought up shows that in 2017, I couldn't find the 2019 chart. This is by Edelman, the world's largest PR firm. And they do a worldwide, what they call trust in institution, a trust report every year. And you can see that the gap between the mass population, which is generally you and me, and the quote informed public, people who are engaged in institutions and who work in institutions and who are believers in institutional veracity and value. So the gap between those two groups, as you can see, is kind of it's kind of highlighted over here. This is the informed public, the kind of top of the pyramid group, and over here is the mass population. And then along here are the population that says that they have trust in their organizations. And the specific organizations that were being looked at in these three surveys, and we're looking at the 2012 versus 2017, were media, business, government, and NGOs, which are non-governmental organizations, kind of like the UN. Doesn't belong to any organization, doesn't belong to any government, but it operates on a worldwide scale. So in 2012, the gap between the elites, the people who run things, and the general population was 9 points. 5 years later, that had widened to 15 points, whereas the trust by the general population had gone down from what it was back to its 2012 level, and the gap and the opinion of the informed public had stayed the same at 60% believing in government. So that's a difference of 15 points on aggregate. The largest gaps are shown on the right-hand side. The US had a 21-point gap between the informed and the mass population, UK 19, and France 18. So there is a worldwide concern and decline in the ability or the credibility by people in the run-of-the-mill people, general population, in institutions, large institutions. And so that's part of where we are coming from, is that there is an increasing, and like I say, I think it came into full flower in the Vietnam War, but there is a continuing and in some cases increasing lack of trust in our institutions. This is one more chart, which is more recent. It was January of 2 years ago, where the social media trust has gone down and now is least trusted institution. And you can see the distrust of all of these different countries. And this is another Edelman survey for its trust barometer. And it's interesting that there is the most trust in institutions in India, Indonesia, and China, which Indonesia and China certainly have controlled state media. So you wonder about the value of having data from them at all. You look over here, and here is the US has declined by 5 percentage points since the previous study. And overall, there are, it says that this is about social media again, that it is it is distrusted in 22 of 28 markets around the world. And that's nominally what this line is. It's showing you where the 50% line is. And that's why it doesn't extend over here, and why we see in Singapore and the Netherlands and the United Arab Emirates, there is a neutral feeling about the media. So we're in a situation where we as communicators have to work much harder to gain trust and credibility than was true in previous decades. That in mind, I have a book on my desk, and it's kind of interesting, and it's kind of, uh, you know, pop science, but he has a few good points that I would like to bring forward and say, from the 27 powers of persuasion, and he has lists, and he has a short section in each one of these. These are my favorites. Focus on the goal of your persuasion. Don't get distracted. Make sure that you understand what you want someone to know, say, or do, and how you think you're going to go about that. And don't get distracted by their protestations or their interest in something else. Evaluate the egos of your population and play to those. For example, you might say, I know that most people won't understand this problem, but let me talk to you about it because I think you are one of the few people who can really understand it and help me to solve this problem. Make people feel safe. You're asking them to change. You're asking them to do something they might not have thought about doing or might not be willing to do before you came on the scene. So first of all, you have to win their trust. You have to make them feel safe, that you're not doing anything to scam them or to get them in trouble or other kinds of things. But you are here to help in a realistic person-to-person sense of it. Watch out for absolutes when you're talking about things. Don't ever say everything is fine or it's all, everybody is talking about this, or other kinds of huge claims that are impossible to know the answer to. And because they are impossible and very unlikely to occur, that they are not helpful in making your persuasive case. In place of them, use data or numbers, because numbers have a patina of solidness. You say there's 17% of something, people believe that there is 17%. If they lined up 100 people, 17 of them would do something. Now that may or may not be true, and the measurement may be not exactly derived, but measurements are very powerful. You should focus when you are writing something, if possible, especially a persuasive piece, though. Talk about it's the choice of the people being persuaded, although we think that there is a wise and obvious choice to make, that it's going to be fair for more people, that this notion of fairness is very deeply ingrained in our DNA. We start saying it in kindergarten or even before, and people believe very strongly in that nobody should be given favorable treatment without an explanation or without their having won that right. Keep it simple, basic communications. Say what you want people to do. Make sure it's clear, make sure all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and that you keep it in a language that is easy to understand, easy to comply with, and that there is a bound to it. You're not asking people to do something forever. You're not asking them to do it so that they get harmed, but you're asking them to do X. Own the language. Make sure that you develop a lexicon of special terms to describe your particular project and what you're trying to persuade people to engage in, and use those terms, because one will cement the notion in their minds. 2, it will reinforce your message. 3, it will reduce the confusion available if you try and be inventive or creative and use other similar words that are not exactly the same. Challenge the details of bad ideas. If somebody comes back to you and says, well, that will never work, be ready with examples of where it did work, or may ask them where they got their data, where's that information coming from, why are you saying that, and what's your particular concern about what we are trying to get done here. Make sure that you ask the second and third question when somebody's not wanting to cooperate. Here's a couple of notions about defective reasoning. ad hominem against the individual, calling somebody a name or calling somebody not capable, which gets off the point of persuading a group or somebody to do things. And it gets you into a personal battle on something that should be an organizational question and debate and discussion. So don't talk about the individuals. Now, we are so much engaged in infotainment and news and entertainment being gathering together, coming together, that it's hard to figure out where one begins, ends, and the other one begins. So we unfortunately are in an era where people in the quasi news business talk in ad hominem terms against the individual, not about policy, not about facts, but about behavior or even appearance. And it's just, this doesn't make any sense to me when we're talking about getting people to do things. We want to make the most passionate, impassioned, logical, fact-filled argument possible, not talking about somebody's clothing or their hair color or anything like that. The value of celebrity has made this both easier and more difficult. Some celebrities are valuable because they have a patina of credibility. They have confirmation that they have done things successfully. A lot of these are business people. Some of them are entertainers. And they have done things like Khloe Kardashian has built $1 billion business, which is just astonishing to me. But she's apparently smart. She's a good promoter. She's worked hard. And her celebrity gave her some opportunities, but then she's moved on from there and become very substantial and somebody whom I think you could count on. But there are other celebrities out there who are celebrities because they are celebrities, and I wouldn't trust their opinions as far as I could throw them. False cause. If somebody says that that they know something, ask them for the data. Ask them where they got it. What's the source? Because it may be that they just heard something and they agreed to it, so they put it back out or repeat it as fact, or their own standing, put their own standing behind it, even though they have nothing. Confirmation bias is hearing something that kind of links in or parallels your own beliefs, even though there may not be any data or new information attached to it. Non sequiturs are things that just don't make sense. For example, if we say this class is going to be very demanding, and then say, I think you'll find this part easy, or this class is very demanding, but most people find it easy. Those two things don't make sense. It's a kind of non sequitur. It doesn't follow, which is what the Latin says. Circular arguments, like you should use this verb because it's a good verb, and it's a good verb because it's widely used. So it goes around in a circular. We see examples like this all the time. Emotional appeals, because you believe in something highly, you may have an emotional attachment to it or emotional experience. The ads you see on TV for helping children in Nicaragua to have a cleft palate fixed, or the puppy commercials, those are all emotional appeals. They're not for bad things, but they are not giving you a logical reason why to fix this. They're hoping to work your emotions, and that will cause you to give them money. I put two movie or TV, one movie, one TV clip, still shot from two of my favorite movies. I have a lot of favorite movies, but Jack in this movie, Jack Nicholson plays a hard-bitten Army lieutenant colonel who is responsible for guarding the fence line around the place near Cuba where we're holding prisoners, Guantanamo Bay. And he's under court-martial in this scene because he allowed some of his men to beat up a person who he thought was not worthy or wasn't pulling his weight. And he thinks that his role as a guardian of the fence, of our essentially guardian of the heartland of the U.S., gives him special privileges. And he's shouting back at Tom Cruise because Tom Cruise says, who gave you, how do you know what is proper? And he said, I spend my days keeping you safe when you're at a wine and cheese party or wherever you're going to the movies. I'm on the gate, I'm on the fence protecting America. And then Tom Cruise says, but why didn't you tell the truth about this thing that you allowed to have happen to one of your men? And he says with his voice, you can't handle the truth. In other words, I'm the only one who can understand the situation that has the credibility and the capability of doing this. So I'm going to make decisions about what to do outside of the chain of command, outside of your overview, because you can't understand what I do. And so he's making an emotional appeal and an ad hominem. He's saying, you people who do not serve are not worthy of looking at me and making judgments about my performance. This other one I just ran into, I'm late to the party on Breaking Bad, but this episode, the two protagonists, if you know them, Jesse and White. Jesse has White down on the floor and he's pointing a gun at him, and White is trying to convince him, persuade him not to shoot him. Jesse's convinced that White has done something to hurt his girlfriend's little boy. And in an amazing scene, White goes through a series of logical deductions and comes to the conclusion that he couldn't have done what Jesse's suggesting that he did, that it had to be somebody else, the big boss in the drug ring that they work for. And here are the reasons why. So he went through very rationally, as is his wont in this series, and talked about and rationalized and understood why it had to be somebody else. And he hadn't done it. And he just went through the logical steps of what was available, who was the benefit, and who had the opportunity. You know, kind of like a detective going through a case. But he made an argument that was logical, based on fact, and available, and ultimately won the day, was convincing and persuasive. So as we talk about theories, I'm just going to dip our toe in the water about this today. But one theory, one definition says theories are a systematic set of ideas. So there are multiple things that can help make sense of a phenomenon. In our case, the communications, excuse me, and persuasiveness of an idea. And we can use a theory to guide the action or predict the outcome. And in my mind, we can also use it by backwards engineering to create the communications persuasiveness that we are looking to do. So we don't only use theories to explain things, but we use theories to design and write and create the communications activities. Ernest Borman, another academic, called theories an umbrella term for all careful, systematic, self-conscious discussion. So he wants you not to be too widespread in your language, but talk about things that you think you can observe, do it systematically so it can be repeated by others, and think about it in your own terms. Am I doing this because of my interest? And am I inserting my own emotion into this situation to come out with a conclusion that fits with my worldview? And it's an analysis of the communications phenomena, the multiple communications phenomena. Judy Burgoon, who writes about gender issues, she's down at New York University, calls theories a set of systemic hunches about the way things operate. And it sounds a little down-putting, like she's making fun of theories, but when you're going out to establish a theory, you look at a situation and you postulate what might be happening in that situation. Then you form that postulate idea into a hypothesis, and then you create a research project which may be able to analyze and suggest that that hypothesis is either supported or not supported. And you need to, it's a whole other field of inquiry. Take my course in research if you haven't taken it yet, and we can talk more about that. Tying theories to PR. How can we use theories to be more effective? Well, we can define the approaches that may be more effective. We can reduce the wrong choices and refine our language, certainly by planning the theory that is most appealing or most persuasive to the audience we are going to lean toward. During the execution of a plan, we can see things evolve. Best laid plans are only as good as one day after the plan is launched, because you never know what's going to happen, and sometimes things get in the way or change, or you may have made some wrong assumptions that you can see and you should change immediately. You keep fine-tuning as you polish it, but you don't change any of the fundamentals of your execution for your campaign. Finally, when you're over, when the campaign is finished, you look at the results, you look at the metrics that you've gained, you look at the big picture. Did something happen that was expected or was desired out of the campaign? And does it fit into the expectation of the theory that you had underpinning all of this? That sounds pretty abstract, but let's try and bring it down to another level. If we were thinking about why a phenomenon worked, why did Donald Trump win the presidency? What was his communication secret? Well, I think it's pretty widely agreed that his celebrityhood from being on the Celebrity Apprentice for 15 years, was a powerful tool for him. So he didn't have to build name recognition. He communicated like very few other presidential candidates have, through giant rallies and through Facebook and Twitter. He used social media to a very great extent. He didn't let people get in between him and the message, and he was his own chief spokesman. So those are the things that worked. What didn't work was his impetuousness, his sometimes lack of a good vocabulary, because he was winging it, and a little bit of inside the locker room old boy network kind of talk that he got. He knows better than to bring it out in public. It's just between friends kind of thing. The social media of today is working for people and for products because it's quick, it's lively, it's fresh, it's simple, it's color and motion at times. So it has a lot of the different things that make communications attractive. What it doesn't have is much measurability, a human interface, a different message for different people. It's all just one big Facebook base. So they're not as effective as they could be if they were to target individuals. And I'm sure they're working on that. They're trying to figure that out. Viral videos, why are they great? Because of social media makes them available to so many people at once, and then they build on themselves, and especially YouTube has trending things that have the videos down the side. Why didn't the Real Dove Women campaign work? Probably because it was too raw. If you remember, and you might want to go back and look at this, Dove did a campaign using real women with real I always say this, non model bodies. They were humans, and they were talking about their experience with Dove and Dove products, and it just made some people uncomfortable. It said it was kind of not very complimentary to the women. I would say, yeah, but they didn't have to be there, and they didn't have to take the money if they didn't want to. But it didn't work, partly because it was positioned wrong, partly because it had some bad video at the beginning where a white girl kind of took off a sweater, not because of the sweater, because there was another one underneath it, and turned into a more tanned girl, turned into a black girl. And people said that was it was racist in that it was appeared to portray a black woman or a white woman becoming a black woman. And that was not what it was supposed to do. Anyway, it was a bad idea, badly executed, and it wasn't thought through as to what the audience would think about it. They came back and did a better one later on, and I think it's still around. So what do we do with theories when we have an idea? Well, things like agenda setting theory, where the proposition was that whatever is on the mass media will be what people are talking about. Not what they're thinking, but what they're talking about. And this was fairly successfully proved in the early 70s, but I think it's out of date now because of social media and the speed that we operate in. Cultivation theory says that it's a theory that people will take and evolve or cultivate into their own feelings in their own situations, something that deserves more data engaged in it. And we'll talk more about those kinds of things later. Right now, I want to talk about something called the Kenneth Burke's dramatic pentad. And he took lots and lots of communications, and he kept analyzing them, boiling them down, figuring out what commonalities they had, until he came up with his pentad, which is essentially a 5-pointed star. And he figured out that there were 5 actions that explain how a communications is working or not working, and what the elements are that need to be in place before communications can really take place. He talked about the act of being what was done or what is being explained. What do the words demonstrate? So what are we talking about? The scene is the area where this is going to take place. And what that tells you about the event or the idea itself. Agent is the person who is working in the activity that's being explained. Burke said that everything was kind of oral tradition, that human beings are by nature storytellers. And so when we're telling a story, we're also using these points to get our message across and to persuade people that our story is valid and one worth listening to. The purpose is the goal. That's why you're doing this. And it's not always clear. And so, again, I go back to my original point that if you're going to ask people to do something, you should ask them straight out and explain what you want them to do in some detail and why it's important for them and for you to be doing that. Agency is how things get done within this communications activity that you're expanding on or that you're leaning toward. Here is the graphic of the pentad. You can see all that a lot of the corners are interconnected because they have to do with each other very carefully. But again, the act is what is going on. Agency is how it is being done. Agent is the person who is promoting the activity or doing the pronouncement or doing the writing, the creating. And the purpose is why it's being done. And the scene is what is the setting? Where is it happening? And what does that tell you about the goals and the outcome? And Burke called this his pentad. If we were live, I would show you this ad with Peyton Manning working on watching people load a new piano into his into a moving van, and he was a MasterCard TV commercial showing that things were better when you use MasterCard, and there's an implicit insurance being with the card. And the actors are obviously Peyton Manning and these two characters from the moving van. The scene is his house, which says that it's something personal and it's something that he's having done. The agency is what happens. What happened is that they are delivering a piano and it slips from their grasp and they are now watching it roll down the hill. The purpose of the ad is to promote the comfort and the utility, the value of having a MasterCard. And they bring that up a number of times. And finally, the agency is what is being done. These people, these couple of goofballs, allow his piano to be slipped down the hill. So does it have all the elements? Yeah. Is it an example of how we can do this? Yes. The other thing I like to say is that we can reverse engineering and say, what is our purpose? And then what kind of people do we want to act? What is the situation? Who are the people who are going to do the acting? And how can we do this in an interesting and engaging way so that people will buy into the goal, will want to get a MasterCard in this case. And in other words, we will persuade them that not that their piano is going to roll down the hill, but if you have MasterCard, things are going to be better no matter what happens. So that was, whoops, cut that. That's the end of the lecture for today, for this week. Let me know if you have trouble or concerns. It's an interesting topic. We could talk for hours about it, but I don't want to spend all your time watching me. So let me know if you have any questions or concerns about the work for this week. It's essentially a talk about what you think is the most credible medium and how is it used in your mind. Review your campaign that you've chosen. I'll have those back to you Monday or Tuesday. And then finally talk about the differentiation between different categories as outlined in the book. So I will be in touch. Call me or email me as many of you have already if you have a question or problem. And have a good week.